share and slideshow. Come on. Okay, is everybody seeing that screen? Thumbs up. Excellent. Okay, so if you were involved or if you were here with me for the Monocacy Cemetery, that was just one cemetery that I was focusing on. This particular presentation is going to take my desire for cemeteries to a whole new level. This is the Montgomery County Cemetery Inventory. This was a project that was developed back in 2004, and I'll give you a little bit of history coming up. But as you can imagine, you know a lot of the public cemeteries, very easy to identify, but a great number of the cemeteries within Montgomery County are basically off-road, and those are the ones that were the hardest to find, to approach, to assess, and all that. So imagine that you were a volunteer back in 2004 when they were just coming up with this concept of an inventory of cemeteries, and you were sent out into the wild. And basically, here you are, you're traipsing through Montgomery County. And why am I pointing to these woods? Somebody somewhere wrote down in a deed somewhere that there was a cemetery on a farm. And here's the farm. You're somewhere on the farm. It's all grown up in trees now, and you have no idea, but somebody said there's a cemetery here. Imagine what you would need to look for, little elements that would identify this as a cemetery. For instance, we have periwinkle. It is a burial flower, very, very prevalent back in pre-Victorian era. And that stuff just never goes away. You can't kill it. So if you see some periwinkle blooming, start focusing a little bit more. You're going to see ground depressions where the graves have settled, the ground has depressed. And you might see an order, you might see in this photograph, you can see 4 depressions here. Groundhog holes, wow, they're everywhere in cemeteries because the dirt that was dug to bury the body and put back in is much softer, and the groundhogs, for some reason, generations of groundhogs will consistently burrow in the same area. So look for groundhog holes. Cut field stones. Maybe these farmers weren't very rich and they couldn't afford, elaborate gravestones. So they would put these field stones out there, just regular field stones that they picked up. They may have chiseled a couple edges to straighten them out, but very rarely would you find initials or names on them. But this one particularly looks like it could have been a marker. But then there's this hidden discovery. And if you're looking in the background image there, in that thicket was this cemetery, and it had 4 standing gravestones. You would never, walking through the woods, you would never imagine that this was a farm field 100 years ago, 150 years ago, and that the family chose to bury themselves on it. And as I've said before, and I will say it again always, nature will always win. This was a cleared field. This was somebody's front yard at one time. So why do we care? These cemeteries, such as this one, are going away. We're starting to lose them, not only to nature, but for other instances coming through. We respect those resting places as part of our, those were our county residents at one time. When we value their existence, what's left as historic burial grounds through and through. And we are striving right now and in the future for the preservation of what is remaining. And we care because we're concerned about their loss, neglect, vandalism, erosion, and more importantly, especially in Montgomery County, is development, buying these homesteads and these farmsteads and turning them into multi-residential properties. Sure enough, you may find a cemetery part of the digging up process, and that's when everything just cuts, everything stops at that point. A little history about that first inventory. Don't worry about all these words here. I'm just going to basically paraphrase, run right through it. A bunch of people got together and they decided that it was a very important idea to get these cemeteries listed in an inventory. And Peerless Rockville took the reins of it, along with Historic Tacoma and the coalition that I mentioned, to get funding to do this, to get a volunteer group together and to assemble this inventory. They were able to create a database and put the cemetery locations on the GIS mapping system. And they included all of the ones that were active, obviously the known ones, the church cemeteries, the ones that were abandoned, that were like you just saw, the abandoned in the woods, lost cemeteries that got mentioned somewhere in a will or in somebody's letters mentioning a cemetery, and those things would pop up and somebody would jot down a note, there's a cemetery out there in the middle of wherever, Laytonsville. That was mentioned, that was brought back to this group, and relocated burial sites. Sure enough, there are some down in Silver Spring or Georgia Avenue that they literally just lifted up what was there in the cemetery and they moved it to another location. But we know that that cemetery was there formerly. They did a great job at identifying advocates such as myself and constituents who were had the means to go out and do these types of surveys, field work basically. They held the workshops, and they created a watch list, and these are the ones that were the most vital, that needed the most attention immediately. Otherwise, they were going to be gone in a matter of whatever, decades. And all of that information was compiled for the public use. A lot of researchers were looking for family members on that own farmland, and maybe they were buried on that farm. So that kind of information was now assembled into basically a sheet down at, you could find it at the Sween Library in a folder. And it's an odd thing to do, but if you're going to research, you go to the library, and that's where it was all kept. In the cover sheets, and you can see the cover sheet up in the upper right corner, and that's basically all the information that was given. And this is the information that the public would want to see. So what has happened since 2004 to 2009? It was a 5-year process, but what's happened since then? The development of technology, first and foremost, is a tool that you're all pretty much holding in your hands, or you're staring at right now, a laptop, a mobile device, GPS machines, anything that is digital could be brought back into this for going out and visiting websites or going out and visiting cemeteries. Digital scanning, people are saying, oh, I don't have a flatbed scanner. You don't need one, you're holding it. The mobile phone is what I basically use every day. If I see a document, I just take a picture of it. That's considered to be a scan, and that can be pulled into a PDF, and there you go. You've already started the process. Genealogy, who doesn't love their family trees? This process here developed even more because people are looking for their family members, because county history is just taking off like wildfire. I've mentioned findagrave.com before. If you haven't visited, please remember that, findagrave.com. It is an essential site for cemeteries, and it is a volunteer-driven website to basically go out and find a burial, take a photograph of it, log it onto that cemetery's webpage, and then it's there forever on the internet. What we're seeing now since 2009 is a continued loss of burial sites and traditional communities. Specifically, we're talking about African-American communities and their burial sites. A lot of African-American slave cemeteries are gone. They're lost. We don't know where they are. But more recently, if you're familiar with Bethesda and what is going on with the Moses River Road Moses Cemetery in Westbard, it was discovered underneath a parking lot. This is the kind of thing that we are trying to prevent. We want the public to know where all the cemeteries are in case anything like this in the future ever happen again. A developer buys a site and he just paves right over the cemetery. New county laws are in place since 2018 that will help to protect these cemeteries, and I'll talk about that shortly, and focus on state laws. Again, coming up 2 slides from now, we're talking about protection and access to cemeteries that are off the beaten path there. So with all of that in mind, it came, it was brought to the attention of the woman who contacted me, who was involved with that first inventory. And she said, why don't we revisit that inventory with all of this in mind, all of this new stuff in mind and the technologies. Very quickly, I'll talk about those laws. The one that was passed in 2017, the Montgomery County unanimously approved the legislation that would require the planning board to establish and maintain the inventory of burial sites within the county. It's very important. When the county recognizes your work and recognizes these cemeteries on plotted map points, and they can put it into their system, that's going to help down the road tremendously. Specifically in the subdivision regulation, imagine, like I said, developers are moving in and they start digging and, oh my God, there's bones, or there's a coffin lid or whatever. There's a gravestone that was previously fallen and buried. Everything stops. Everything. There's no more development on that site until all of this is looked into. And now that law is in place. And now we have the Maryland law, also passed in 2018, which grants descendants, researchers, and persons of interest access to private land cemeteries on private land. Imagine how important that is. You're not trespassing if you are going there as a descendant or somebody who needs to do some research, or an advocate of a cemetery, and you're basically trying to gather more information. The towns authorize this to the grant property tax credits to these people if they helped you out. It would be a great thing. We need as much information from the property owners that we can get. We're not trying to break through any privacy walls or anything. We're just trying to collect information. Maryland Historical Trust advises these owners on their cemetery maintenance and conservation. There's a whole lot of information that they can offer to them. They're like, oh, I have a cemetery in my front yard. I ignore it. Well, we can help you take care of it with minimal maintenance. And this is what this project has turned into. These are websites that you can look at. I'll take you to one later, the MontgomeryPreservation.org and the Coalition to Protect Maryland Burial Sites.org, CPMBS.org is the organization I belong to. Lots of information about cemeteries within the state and locally. However, cemetery sales are still occurring without notifying anybody. The land is being sold to developers and nobody's telling anybody that it's happening. It only occurs when something like a discovery comes up. The preservation incentives, like I said, the tax credits, we really don't have anything in place. It was just mentioned that could be an option, but still nothing is happening with that. Better records are needed for moving remains. Remember, I mentioned the removal of the whole entire cemetery in the middle of Georgia Avenue, or next to Georgia Avenue down in Silver Spring. All of those bodies were apparently, or should have been, all of them brought to the other cemetery. You don't know. You don't know if there's bodies still underneath the parking lot in front of the Safeway down there. The maps need to show cemetery locations. We got that covered. I'll show that to you later. So now we enter into the revisited cemetery inventory. And I'll talk on the grand scale for a second. Montgomery County, here's a map of it. There are 507 square miles of Montgomery County. Now you can imagine my opening slide, I said we're going to send our volunteers out to look for the cemeteries. Well, we have 507 square miles to cover. So that's a lot to look for when you're looking for lost cemeteries. I devised this gridded system of a 4.5 square mile grid overlaid on top of this, this map. It created 43 zones. So we're going to start breaking it down just a little bit. At the time, we had 324 identified burial sites, cemeteries, burial grounds, family grave sites identified. So we had to see where they were going to occur within the map. So each zone here, I'll blow this up, each zone you can see those red dots. Those are the cemetery locations. So that's where we would be sending everybody exactly to that location to start looking. There was one zone leader assigned and many volunteers, as many as we can get to do this, sent to that one zone. And they took care of only that one zone and reported back to me. So we opened it up to the county. We went back to Montgomery Preservation. They took the reins on this one with a grant from Heritage Montgomery, Peerless Rockville. Remember, they started the first one, and General Smallwood chapter of the Sons of American Revolution donated money towards getting this thing moving. The highlight for me, though, was having 88 volunteers trained to do this. We were worried at the first inventory, I believe they had maybe 25 to 30 people. So this thing expanded, and we needed it. We had 507 square miles that we had to cover. Those red dots helped though. So each volunteer was given a packet, and in that packet was this form. Really small writing, I realize that for you looking on it, but basically it covered burial site information, the necessary information, the name of the place, the address of the place. On your mobile device that they were carrying, you have the ability to take GPS coordinates. So when they were out there in the site, they turned on that app, hit the dot, it zoned in on where they were, and they wrote down those GPS coordinates. So now what was, if there was a cemetery that was considered lost or they couldn't really find it, now you're talking, you can pinpoint it accurately on a map and use your phone, your mobile device on a mapping program and walk right to it. The burial site types, we broke that down: religious burials, the church graveyards, communities, the African-American community cemeteries, families out on the farms, stuff like that. And part of it was they would go to these sites and they would, we gave them aspects to look for, but basically we wanted their description, their personal first impression, and write down what exactly you're seeing. Nothing was ever touched. It was just hands-on, go there and photograph everything. Write down notes. If you see gravestones upright, write it down. Fallen gravestones, write it down. We need them to describe it so that somebody who has not visited could understand what they would be looking at. Important on finding the contact for that particular burial site was finding the owner or the custodian, the person who would be taking care of it. We were using tax maps to find names, addresses, phone numbers, and all of that stuff is very important for this revisited inventory so that it could all be put onto the county's GIS system. We recorded the name of the volunteer only because if we needed extra information, they might be able to answer it first person instead of us having to go back out to that site. Any comments and suggestions that they were going to offer, we took whatever they wanted to say and we read through it. If it was important, we included it. And at this point, we had a lot of researchers involved with this particular inventory process, and they went neck deep in research and gave the Maryland Historical Trust documents if they could find them, wills if they found wills of landowners. It was a lot more than I anticipated, but it was great. And these volunteers, basically, I just said that they assessed the current condition, determined ownership, utilized the modern technology in their hands, and they researched a lot of the lost cemeteries through land records and tax maps and all of that, and a total success for what we were hoping they would find. All of that information, that form particularly, and their photographs, and any deeds that they were able to find, or historic maps of any kind, that was all pulled together into one PDF, and that was the PDF that we were going to hand off to the county. And it was all done by simple volunteers. There was no professionals involved with this process. So we gathered all of that information, 324 cemeteries. We were given 1 year to do this. And basically you do it in the wintertime, in the first couple, 3 months, because the cemeteries themselves don't have the overgrowth in them. Getting out there in the summer heat was the worst part of it. And then towards the end of the year, the ones that we couldn't find or we needed extra attention, we went back to cover those. I think there was only 24 or 27 of the 324 that we had to go and do some more evaluation. But we gathered all that information. And I thought, well, now that we know where everything is, what about if we can get this onto Google? You know, everybody uses Google Maps. And I contacted Google and they said, I explained what we had done, and we have all this information in our hands. We know locations, GPS coordinates. How about letting us put it on Google Maps? And they agreed. It was incredible. Just an example of what we're seeing here is a blow up. This is up the reservoir here. And you can see by name all of those locations. So if you wanted to go onto Google Maps and type in Montgomery County cemeteries, you're going to get a list of all of the ones. And as you zoom in on particular areas, you're going to get a pinpoint. And with that pinpoint, you can get directions from wherever you're standing or sitting in your house, and you'll get a map directly to that location. Remember the last time in 2004, people still had map books in their car. And that, you know, they got, I don't know what that got yet, but frustrated. So here we are, new technology working. So the results of this inventory. I mentioned 324 cemeteries. Granted, this presentation was given back in January of 2019, which was 2 years ago. Since then, there have been more discoveries because people heard about this project and they came forward with more information. Very excited to report, and this will be updated. We will update this again. So since 2004 through 2018, 55 cemeteries were added. That's a lot of new cemeteries. 16 of the cemeteries that were relocated, that we knew that they were relocated, we know where they originally were. So what we did was we created the survey for them for that particular location. That was important just historically to know that there was a cemetery there. You know, the particular one on Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring. Guaranteed it's always going to happen. I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer it. They got it. All right. That the cemetery was removed out of county. The bodies were removed out of county, brought up to Laurel, and there was a church that was right next door. That church was taken down, and you want that recorded. That's part of the history. I remember there being a church there, and they had a graveyard, and now it's a parking lot. So it's unfortunate. 63 cemeteries are still listed as being lost, or we just don't know their exact location. But through deeds that people were looking up and finding, we were able to record that within an approximated vicinity of this particular GPS coordinate, there should be a cemetery, the family cemetery. I'm excited to report that 12 of those lost cemeteries were now found. Because of the information, the research that was done. So we were able to add 12 of the lost cemeteries up onto those 324. And I don't know that you would know this, but there are 13 cemeteries located in public park settings within our county. It's an interesting fact, and the county knows, you know, it's part of their regimen to take care of them. It's awesome. You can access all of this work that was done, every single PDF for all 324 cemeteries, by going to montgomerypreservation.org. There's a pull down for historic cemeteries. And what that will give you is the list of cemeteries by cemetery name, or by the ID number that was assigned to it, or by the vicinity. And this one is kind of important. If you don't know that you have a cemetery in your backyard, you might want to use the vicinity one, because you're going to go back to that map, that the gridded map, the zones, and you know what zone you live in. So you're going to kind of zoom in on zone 22 and you'll be able to scroll down to zone 22 and see all of the cemeteries that are in your neighborhood. With all the information that we gathered, we did have some recommendations of what to do with it. We wanted to make sure that the files themselves were accessible through Montgomery Preservation, Montgomery Planning, which it is now, and Montgomery History. Anywhere that people would do research for families in their final resting places, these are the places that you would want to go, including the Montgomery History Library, the Sween Library down at the Bell Dawson House in Rockville. We are encouraging owners to keep engaged with our volunteers, our advocates, property owners, and our partners. If something is happening in their neighborhood, they want us to know about it. They contact us, we go out there, we reassess the situation. There's a current situation going on the Morning Star Tabernacle number 88 down on Seven Locks Road. They're widening 495 and it's cutting through the cemetery. That's a problem. So these are the kind of issues that we're dealing with when developers decide what they're going to do, the state decides what it's going to do, and there's a cemetery in the way. Another one in Germantown, I won't bring it up, but work was done. We stepped up and they had to do a workaround. The planning board appoints a cemetery advisory group, and the volunteers form a Montgomery County Cemetery Coalition. This hasn't taken off yet. We were just discussing this earlier at a meeting. I would love to see this happen because, you know, I hope that there are other people like me who are interested in cemeteries and their preservation. And maybe this could be a really great way for the county to understand that there's a number of us and we have what it takes to keep the cemeteries where they are. Evaluate and nominate cemeteries for designation on the Montgomery County Master Plan. We were discussing this. There's a list of ones that absolutely should be considered to be on our master plan forever. And we'll follow up with that shortly. The conversation is just beginning. Continued. We're going to maintain the lists of site groupings. We had that watch list that we had back in 2004. That has evolved. A lot of the cemeteries were brought onto this watch list. And because we have photographs of every cemetery, we can pull up that report really quickly. We can look at the cemetery and say, oh my God, what is happening here? Add that to the watch list, and we will review that watch list every year to make sure something is being taken care of at that location. Another thing is the GPR technology, ground penetrating radar technology is out there now. Imagine, we know where all those cemeteries are, we know their conditions, but there's also lost ones out there in the vicinity. Ground penetrating radar is the greatest way to go out there and just scan the ground and see if you're seeing any depressions or you're getting any hits below ground and in patterns or in rows. And there you are. We have that technology now and we hope to use it. I would love to get a GPR system myself, and I go into business full time to do this. Putting together events, cleanup events, that's the easiest thing the volunteers can do at this point. The scouts are looking for Eagle Scout projects. This is the kind of stuff they can come to us and we would point them in a direction. We have one Eagle Scout working on doing signage for a cemetery that is pretty much off the road. African American cemeteries are a priority in our county, excuse me. There are 81 African American cemeteries on our list, and a lot of them are missing or lost. So we're going to put a lot of energy over the next couple of years into using technology to zero in on land, on farms, slave cemeteries. You know, where would they bury the dead slaves? They didn't bury them in cemeteries. They buried them on the land. So this is what we have to look for. And enforcing those laws I mentioned before, we've got to. The county understands why we're doing this. The state now recognizes the importance of doing this. So we're just going to keep adding and adding and adding more aspects to those laws, specifically for protection. The cemeteries are now part of the county tax map, so you can, if you're familiar with MC Atlas, you can go on there now and you just activate the cemeteries level, and they'll all pop up, and you'll be able to see them, and you'll also be able to see the reports. There's a link there that pulls up the original 2004 inventory cover sheet and the new 2018 inventory form. And fund maintenance and restoration of burial sites and public land. That's really difficult to do. We would love for that to happen, but money is a whole nother monster in terms of getting grants. Easy to apply for a grant, but when it comes to cemeteries, I guess people are a little standoffish. But again, we would love to see that. We would love to promote the maintenance and restoration of these cemeteries that need it. The next steps that are occurring back in 2019, these were the things that were going to happen. The MPI Montgomery Montgomery Preservation website will host all of these documents that we have, and it links over to Montgomery Planning, who has this map system where you can also access them. Public hearings and planning board officially establishes the inventory and adopts the guidelines. The guidelines are very specific, how they take this information and what they do with it. And the guidelines have been received and accepted. Workshops, we can easily do this. We have a whole bunch of people at, I guess my level of advocacy. We want to show you how to do simple preservation techniques. Never, ever, ever touching a gravestone, cleaning the ground, cutting the grass, or trimming the weeds. But that kind of stuff helps with the preservation down the road. So it's just not becoming, remember the first slide, nobody took care of it, and that's what happens. So this model for the inventory, we've had other counties asking us, can we use that same technique, the volunteer-based zoning, going out, gathering the information, collecting it, and what to do with it. So I would, I'm proud to say that this was a success, 100% success in what we're doing. So now that we've done all that and we know what the cemeteries are, what can we do? And remember I mentioned that the watch list, the #1 cemetery on that watch list was actually right in your backyard. It was the Barnesville Methodist Episcopal Cemetery on Barnesville Road, right in downtown. It's right across from St. Mary's Catholic Church. Did you know that? A lot of people didn't. Even the people in Barnesville, a lot of people didn't know it was there. So I did a little quick history. I was hoping to find more history on it, but there's really not a lot. We do know that there was a meeting house there constructed in 1843. Eventually, 2 years later, it became a house of worship. And they started they buried one person I know the year between the construction and the establishment of the church. But it didn't last very long. The last recorded mention of this church that I found was 1896. So basically, 50 odd years it lasted. The records were kept and given to another church in the county, and I tried contacting them, and they no longer have the records, so we don't know where they went. But strangely enough, somebody posted a letter in 1899 to revive the church. They were going to do a lot of renovations on the actual wooden structure. We don't know what happened after that. I don't know when the church building itself was torn down. But the building is going to go away, but guess what? The cemetery didn't. And this was the condition that I found it in. This was back in 2008. The land was sold to a private home owner, resident, and basically ignored. So when I arrived there, I was looking for a relative that was buried at Monocacy Cemetery. And I found a snippet in one of the historic books that mentioned that this relative was buried at the Barnesville Cemetery. And I'm like, St. Mary's? No, St. Mary's wasn't there when this guy died. And zeroed it down to this location. I got in my car, drove here. I was like, I don't want to go on somebody's land. And I knocked on the door and I'm like, is there a cemetery here? And the guy said, no. And I was like, are you sure? And the wife's like, where does he want to see? He wants to see the cemetery. Let him see the cemetery. So that's a little persuasive there. Got back here and I saw this. I can't tell you how heartbroken I was because I'm seeing a burning barrel and it's resting on gravestones of 2 infants that died. I see broken grave markers. They're just snapped off. Either they were knocked over by a vehicle. There was a tractor parked on here. There was a truck. Underneath that pine tree over there is a private enclosure, and that had tires piled in there. It was a junkyard. And I was like, well, can I come back here and start cleaning it up on my own time? And the guy's like, no. So eventually he passed away, and I went back and I talked to his wife, and the wife's like, sure, you can do that. This is now 10 years later. So we gathered some volunteers. You can see Kenny Scholes back there. He's my hero. We got in there, gloves, rakes, whatever we could, just to clear out all the stuff. And you can see it makes quite a dent from what we saw 10 years previously. But then it sat for a couple of years because we had gotten a grant to come in and restore the cemetery. But that the grant, the person who was going to come and help with that was very, very busy. And then COVID and all of that. So this is 2 years after we cleaned it out. This is what it looked like again. So nature always wins. I repeat it. This is what it looked like. And this was even worse than what we had originally cleaned up. So we got back in there with our volunteers, and we got down to roots. We were stripping grass out of this thing so that it wouldn't grow back. And you can see these results are pretty impressive, so much so that you are starting to see gravestones that were knocked over in the clear. I mapped the cemetery. We located where every single stone was located on a map for posterity. And then we started really clearing things out and realized that a lot of these stones were actually knocked over intentionally and buried. And doing a little light probing on the ground, we were able to locate 80 stones and flip them over. There's the name. It was actually the one you can see in the lower right-hand corner, impeccably as if it was just etched, a couple years earlier. Every single mark on that was pristine. Not so much for the ones that were falling over and face up into the weather, but this was a highlight to see. So I mapped the cemetery. Here you can see the before of the cemetery, the shed in the background here on the left, just randomly placed stones. You can see in the upper left-hand corner there, whoever did this just started piling stones around that little wrought iron fence enclosure. Very disheartening. Some of them were just stacked 5 high, and no idea where these people would have been buried. You remove the stone, you remove the base that holds it, and you have no idea where these people are buried, including a Civil War soldier who died up at Sugarloaf. But what I did is came up with a system of the ones that we knew where they were located, and they had a matching base that was snapped. We recorded that location. All the other ones we just had to even out. I'm sorry, we couldn't. There was no way of knowing. But this is the current map of where the stones are located. You can see it's much cleaner, more presentable, and we have an archive. I've placed every single one of the known burials here on findergrave.com. So if you want to go see it, you can see the picture of the stone, the restored stone that we cleaned up and laid down. Everything is there forever on the internet. So going back, you'll remember this is what we were facing with our volunteer group, but this is what it looks like today. It is completely, there will be no weeds growing up through this pebble base. We have weed matting underneath it. It's going to prevent it. We have a metal edge that's going to contain the boundaries of this site. The stones that were found that we were going to have conservation done and have them uprighted, we just decided to lay them flat. They're safer flat for now. So this is what it is looking like. Very, very, very happy with the results. We'll go back there on a 3 or 4 month basis. If there's any weeds growing around the corners or the edges, we'll just pull them. Much easier than what we have to what we started with. But other than that, that is the presentation. I will take off, stop share, and I'm going to open the chat. Wow. Oh my God. You guys are typing.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. I can read them to you.
You can. And while you're doing that, while you're reading, let me do something else here. I wanted to share with you, and I'll just let this run. These are the cemeteries of your county. There we go. And I'll just click through, just enjoy them, but go ahead and ask.
All right, I'm gonna start our questions from the beginning, and you can just let me know if anyone, you ask a question and you'd like to elaborate on it, feel free to unmute or send another question in the chat. Does ground penetrating sonar, sometimes used for old cemeteries, actually detect remains or simply disturb soil density in the grave pit?
Disturb soil. It doesn't have the ability to, I try to say, you've seen, what is it called when you go in and you have your baby and they put that little scope on the baby now and you can get 3D images of your fetus, that kind of, oh my God, I wish they could do that with cemeteries. That would be the coolest thing, but you'd see, whatever, the details. But no, it's just a blip on the map of disturbance, of softening. You're going along hard soil and then it gets soft and you'll get a nice blip, a sound wave, and then it goes hard again. That's where you see that there could be a burial. It doesn't guarantee that there's a burial there, but no, again, if there is a slight depression that matches up with that wave, definitely a burial.
So Martinsburg, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is Jack Templeton, Glenn.
There's a full one, yep.
Several years ago, up at the thrift shop,
yes.
They actually, you probably remember this, they surveyed that ground with
yes. So ironically, this is on the screen for you right now. This is
right. Yeah. So while they can tell there was a cemetery there,
right,
they don't know for a fact whether the remains were disinterred or not.
Right, and there's people who know better than I that the burials that were occurring there, that was a Civil War encampment, and
right.
If there were deaths or what do you say? They were brought in, they were injured, they didn't make it. Were they buried out back? I don't know, but they were probably not buried with coffins or any kind of embalming. So deterioration of bodies, I don't know. I really don't know. I saw the amount of work that went through. Here's one of those cemeteries that makes me cry. It's squeezed between two houses, and they were parking their cars on it. Yeah. But no, yeah, sorry, Jack, I don't know what the results of that. There's a report that's written, and I think I could put my hand on it through the research. Somebody turned in the report. One of the volunteers found that report and turned it in. So I think I can give access to that.
Yeah, thanks.
How's that for a cemetery?
Wow.
That's a wall. This is a restored cemetery. This is in Clarksburg. This is the Clark family. The stones were found leaning against a tree decades ago, and they were restored somewhat differently than most people would do it. But they, if you look closely, you see that the fragments of the remaining stones were inset into concrete in the shape of gravestones, which it happened. But anyway, any other questions?
Yes. The next one is the Martinsburg Community Cemetery now the site of Bassett's Restaurant where the graves moved?
Can you say that again?
Yes. Is the Martinsburg Community Cemetery now the site of Bassett's Restaurant where the graves moved?
I'm misunderstanding that there was a cemetery where Bassett's is currently. The cemetery that was near Bassett's is the one that Jack and I were just talking about, which was over near the thrift shop. The one, the Martinsburg Cemetery is completely different. It's an African-American cemetery out near Caliva. And we have a volunteer opportunity coming up for anybody who wants to go clean it.
If you look at the GPS mapping that you mentioned, you see the wall of Bassett's and it says Martinsburg Community Cemetery. So that's why I asked that question. I was very surprised. I had no idea that that may have been the site of a cemetery.
I want to review that again. Say that
Okay.
one more time.
If you look on your little what was the little thing I think the Google Maps and you said like cemeteries in your area, it brings up all the red dots.
Yes.
And it said I'm pretty sure it was Martinsburg Community Cemetery, and it showed the wall, the outer wall of Bassett's Restaurant
I'm writing that down.
on Elgin Road and
Yeah.
you know, at the corner of Elgin and
Right.
107.
I'm going to write that down because in hindsight, years later, that doesn't sound right at all.
Yeah, it was crazy. I had no idea.
Okay. And that was Martinsburg.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure thing. And Bassett's. Okay. Any other questions? I love this cemetery.
Are developers required to consult inventory as a part of the approval process?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great question. Here's the thing. When a developer buys land, they have to, and they start, they come up with this beautiful idea of what they want to build on that land. Eventually, those plans have to get submitted to somewhere. And that's where the county information is coming in. And all that work that we did to get those maps located onto the county maps, that's where you're going to get that little red blinking light when they tune in, like, wait, developer wants to build on there? And no, there's a cemetery there. Just in terms of give you a case study of what's happening, the Zechariah Water Cemetery. If you're coming 270 southbound and you get off at Father Hurley,
Right.
Southbound, to the right there, you see new development going on in the background there. As you come off that exit ramp and you look through those trees right there, that is the Zechariah Waters Family Cemetery. Wouldn't you know it, on a development site. And they had to incorporate that cemetery now into the development plan. Meaning they're going to do pretty much what you see here on the screen. There's a fence up already around it to protect it, but they found bodies outside of that area of other relatives. So developers have to be wary. They were going to put a road, a bridge, an overpass for 270 that came right down across burial sites. So these are the kind of things that, and you're looking right at it now. Talk about coincidence. You can see in the background there, they've already started digging. There's a brand new building right in that dirt field now. But between that dirt field and this family cemetery is where the crossover bridge is going to be eventually placed. So yeah, these are things that we get called on all the time.
Our next question is, today when you purchase a cemetery lot, how long can you expect remains to be left alone?
Perpetually, forever. I mean, in our state, think about it in Europe. Well, I'm going to turn this question 180 degrees. In most European cities, you're given 7 to 17 years in your little cubby. That's it. After that, the body's gone, the bones are collected and either cremated or crushed or whatever. In most cases here, we don't disinter for the sake of reusing grave sites. Don't even talk to me about this slide right here. This is out in Comus. No, it's meant to be a permanent burial site.
How does the owner of the property feel about having a cemetery on their property? I'm not sure which specific one that was about, Tiki.
You know what, when our volunteers, this is a fun question. When our volunteers went out and they're like, I don't want to approach about the owners. I just want to do this and I don't want to approach. Most of them had the owners grab their arm and walk them to the cemetery. So there are owners who are thrilled that the county is identifying and caring for part of their property. In only, I think, 2 cases, we were like, what are you doing on my land? You know, still the cemetery was recorded. We had to for the county, but I think only 2 instances out of 320 odd owners we had an issue with, but you know, it was positive. It was a positive reaction across the board.
What can you tell us about the Hemp family cemetery? The narrative mentions Civil War and Native American burials.
Let me exit here. And there we go. Let me see.
Hey, Glenn, this is Heidi and Roger. It's in
That's Heidi.
It's in Bellsville, kind of the property, the Hanover
Golf course, yeah.
behind the firehouse and all the way up.
Yes. Let me get back here. Currently, remember they had the 2004 inventory. They recorded it as being lost. It was a rural cemetery that was lost. I know Kenny was just talking about the golf course and the house that's still sitting there.
Right.
What makes me wonder is a lot of the hempstones were brought right up the street to Monocacy Cemetery.
Right.
So I don't really know if anybody was left there, but again, it was a recorded cemetery on a deed. So I'm looking at the old thing. It says there are also Native American Civil War burials on the property.
On the golf course property?
Yeah, and you know, same with, you know, behind the thrift store in Poolsville.
That's really been turned over.
Yeah, and we don't know. We just don't know. There's, I guess the one instance that I came across where was an encampment for the Union Army, and it was over on. Do you know where Glen Road is in like Travilla area?
Yeah.
And you know, oh my God, the Glenstone is the art museum there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God, if you've ever been, if you haven't been, what are you doing on Saturday? There was an encampment recorded by a guy who was writing home to his mom in Massachusetts. And he said that the camp cook was killed during either the slaughter of the cow that kicked him and he fell back, he hit the post and the beam fell down and crushed his head, and death, 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 and they buried him in the camp. And he wrote a poem about it. He drew a map of where they buried this guy under the tree on the top of the hill. And when we see stuff like that, and that was brought to our attention, we're like, Google map, we got to find it. And we found it. And there is a marker on top of it. There was 2 other deaths in that camp. But the father from Massachusetts came down and collected the one body. And then he said, oh, this other guy was from Massachusetts too. I can take his body home. So he removed 2 bodies and the cook remains. So, and it's right now, somebody decided they were going to put a wooden pole fence up around it, and the tree is still there. It's just.
Is
amazing.
it on the Glenstone property? Or?
It's bordering. It is on their property, but to access it, you have to go through a development to the back side, to the west side of the property.
Interesting.
Wow. Thank you.
So
Yeah.
I have a quick question. We didn't type it for Dottie to read, but you mentioned sort of artifacts that signify the possibility of, you know, a graveyard or, you know, burial sites, periwinkle, other things like that.
Yes.
For those of us who have, you know, spent a lot of time out here, or, you know, growing up or hiking or whatever, you know, when you see these lone trees in these big farming fields that sort of designate maybe an original homestead or something else, is there a good chance that there's a burial area around those trees?
I call them spirit trees.
Yeah.
The lone tree in the middle of a field, it's just pastoral to look at sunsets. It's just beautiful. I don't recall, there was one image that you saw in the slideshow of the county cemeteries
Yeah.
that showed a copse of trees that I do know has a family buried within them. So it's
Possible.
it's possible, but I would say a majority of family burial sites were placed at the edges of the properties,
Yeah.
not in the middle of the fields. Peculiarly, is that a word? Look that up. In Poolsville, there is the Wood Family Cemetery. Don't go there. I'm going to tell you about it. Scrolling. Okay. It's out in the vicinity of Partnership Road. All I'm going to tell you about it, it's on private land. You're not going to go there, but let me pull this thing up and show you. I can do a screen. Nope, that's definitely not it. Come here. Wood Family. Okay. I'm going to share a screen again if I can. And here, share. It's still showing. Did I choose? Oh, you have it. Is everybody seeing the little thing sticking up out of the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a cemetery out in the middle of nowhere land. And I'll show you what I was walking through to find it. This is a cornfield, hundreds of acres big. And sure enough, walking towards it, this is what we found. And I'm currently working with the descendants of this family. The guy came from England. He was a stone cutter, and you can see, look at the quality of the stones. They're gorgeous. These are this is one of the oldest cemeteries in Montgomery County. And these stones face up are still this pristine. So this is one of those instances that maybe there was a line of trees through this cornfield at one time, hundreds of years ago, but now these are sitting out in the middle of it. They take very, very good care to go around them with the big harvesting machines. But you can imagine, this is the kind of stuff that we were finding.
So somebody asked the question about Texas and Lewis's orchard there. I thought Texas was closer to Sugarland and that area possibly near Partnership that you were just talking about, or
Okay.
Hughes Road. But anyway, that question is where did you didn't
Have I
Have
identified?
you identified if there are any African American cemeteries near or close to the Texas location?
yeah, the Texas location.
I don't know anything about it. If somebody does know something about it, here's your chance. Speak up.
Well, so, I mean, that was part of the discussion that Jeff Sipek gave about
Sugarland.
Sugarland and Texas, the property called Texas. But I didn't think it was near Lewis's orchard. I thought it was down closer to was Sugarland.
Was Sugarland.
And
Okay.
near Sugarland and Partnership Road
Right.
area. But anyway,
Please contact me through your channels if anything comes up. Even word of mouth helps. You know, families pass down, these stories of seeing gravestones or knowing that there was a cemetery at a particular location. Pass it along. We'll get it recorded. Most important, record it.
Is the Hempstone Cemetery on the reservoir
A
on
resurvey.
Hanover? Yeah, resurvey on Hanover property. A portion of that was purchased by the Honmans in 1890.
Historically, I am not qualified to answer that.
Yes,
I don't know. I don't know anything about it.
You can answer that.
I think so, yes.
Okay, so we have no more questions in the chat. So now would be the time if you'd like to unmute and ask questions, or if you thought of any more questions during the discussion that you would like to ask.
I have a question, Glenn,
Sure, Melissa.
because I pass it so many times, but out 109 near Thurston, just before you get to Thurston Road, there's a church on the left with a small cemetery.
Okay.
I think that's still Montgomery County. It's going out 109 before you get to, it's before you get to Thurston.
Yeah, I know where that is, Melissa. It's right on the side of the road.
Is
But
it on Thurston Road?
And the church
No,
is brick church.
It's on 109.
Yep.
But every time I go by, I guess I'm going too fast and my eyesight isn't that great and I can never see the name of the church. I need to like stop and look. But it has
Yeah,
a
I think,
graveyard right next to it.
yeah, I think Thurston is right there at the Frederick border, if I'm not.
This is before that. It's an old brick church. It's right on
Oh,
the road.
yes,
And there's
yes,
a
yes,
huge
yes, yes.
farm across
Um,
the street.
Is it Zion? Yeah, now you're gonna make me want to remember 324 names.
Yeah, I think it is Zion.
It is Zion?
I think so.
Oh, no, it's Sugarloaf.
Yeah, I didn't
Sugarloaf.
think it was Zion. That Zion is before that, I
Yeah,
think.
Zion's,
talking
it's
about the
definitely not. It is Sugarloaf, and I will pull it up right here.
Yeah, but there are more Zion churches.
Not Sugarloaf Pet Cemetery.
No, that's different.
Yeah, that's.
That's a different one.
Sugarloaf Mountain Chapel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
And quickly share and there. So share. So this is the inventory form that you can see here. Everything that was written down, accepted, and scrolling down the map that we were given, and then the volunteer took a series of photographs approaching it, and this is what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, there's they are working right now, actually. The back side of that is on a sloping hill, and you can imagine with all the wet rains that we've had for the past couple decades, they're sliding. The grave slides are the stones are sliding down the hill, so they're doing a lot of work in the back there to protect it.
So just a comment, like just a thought that went through my head is that we're losing a lot of history because of cremation. So people are not, burying
Right.
those cremations, and
Well, they could at Monocacy Cemetery.
I know they could. I saw that, which is great.
Hype. But yeah, but still people like what we're doing at Monocacy, and if they want to be buried in a cemetery, the option is there.
Right.
Otherwise, you saw columbarium photographs, the big wall inside the church. Those are very, very European style of burial, but a lot of scatterings, which we don't allow at our cemetery. People, I don't know. It's just it's your preference. It's your decision. But I don't know that you're losing history, because for God's sakes, your Facebook profile is going to be up for thousands of years.
That's true. That's true.
And if you're going to be tweeting from heaven, I know it. It's social media is going to save history.
That's true.
Unless you get kicked off, but that's a different story.
Good
Then you're
point.
forgotten so quickly.
Good point.
Yeah.
Do we have any last questions?
We have a guest here.
Hey, how's
This
it
is
going?
Ben.
I'm Ben. I've been listening in. Really cool stuff here.
Thank you,
awesome
Ben.
Stuff. But Yeah, I was gonna ask, have you ever checked out, so going into Poolsville on 107, going right into Poolsville, there's a big old tree in the middle of one of the Jameson's cornfields there. And I believe there's a couple graves under there. I remember doing a photo shoot there in high school with some friends and we found them.
You found gravestones?
Yeah, there's one or two up.
All right, I'm getting my keys. I'm on my way.
Okay, cool, yeah.
So it's right past, if you pass Partnership and you're coming into Poolsville and you go around the bend, the spirit tree that you, the name that you identified.
The hard bend.
Yes.
I walked out there.
Oh, yeah.
I did. I walked out there. I parked my car because I thought surely there's also like shrubs growing up in a circle underneath that spirit tree. And I was like, that's going to be a cemetery. I just know it. And parked the car. It was about 40 degrees below zero. And I'm running across the field and people I know are like, that's Glenn. I looked for depressions. I didn't see any gravestones though. Were there maybe field stones, just regular rocks?
Maybe. I remember a gravestone being there years ago. Yeah, now it makes me want to go back and check and see if.
Did you take a picture of it?
No, this was like, I'm not that old, but this is before phone cameras.
Film cameras, remember those?
Yeah, I should have.
Interesting. There was no stones unless, of course, it was buried. The one you saw could have been buried underneath that tree over time.
Yeah, it was like poking out of the ground. I remember we sort of stumbled across it, and it was short, and there's definitely was scripture. Like
I know what I'm doing on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this brings up an interesting question there, Glenn. I mean, with all your contacts, do you have sort of like a business card that you give to local farmers in areas like this where, or you're known to people who fall over things in the field?
No, it's mostly through social media that people would be able to contact me. This is not my profession.
Yeah, no, I know, but just those farmers must know a lot if they're either old-time families, or they're,
right. Actually, when I was coming up with ideas of how to approach the cemetery inventory revisited, one of the ideas that I had was to write letters, literally 507 square miles of letters to everybody and say, this is what we're doing. We were going to advertise in all the papers. We were going to advertise on social media. And I got a little bit of pushback because they didn't think that we would get any response whatsoever. And in thinking about it, I would say maybe 10 of the cemeteries, of the 55 that we found since 2004, maybe 10 of those people lived on the farms and contacted us through a different channel. So if we had sent out letters to thousands of farmers, we would have gotten.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so. I would go to, I would do it some other
Would
way.
I do it now?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Especially we should have done it during this COVID restrictions because nobody's going anywhere and they would love to respond to my letter.
Yeah. The Farm Bureau or something. All right, it's just a thought. I'll think more about it.
Right. Are you volunteering there, Heidi?
On Saturday, I'll be there. I thought.
No. I meant to start typing letters.
Oh, I'd love to do stuff like that.
Getting me a mailing list.
Yeah, I'll think about some contacts for you. How about that?
Awesome. Good.
Any last questions? Well, I think now would be a perfect time. Yeah, I would say now is a good time to unmute and say thank you so much.
Oh, it's great.
That was such a great presentation.
Thank you. This was so much fun. And I'm just glad to see that there's people that I'm hoping to spark more interest. So you know how to get to me. I'm available. Okay. I'm bored out of my mind. I've been in this room for 1 year.
And you can always email us as well if you'd like to pass along information to Glenn. I can always do that for you.
Fun. Well, and Glenn, let us know the volunteer opportunities, like if you're doing something locally that, a local group may be interested in, we'd love to know about that. So
we were talking, I quickly mentioned Martinsburg Community Cemetery out near Kaliva.
Right.
we went out there, I was out there with Jeff, and it was, there's so much work. Nature won. And we thought there has to be hundreds of stones poking up out of the ground at the leaves and the branches, the fallen trees and the shrubs. It was shocking how far back this cemetery went. And if we could clean that up to make it look like that Barnesville cemetery.
So when do you plan to do that? Do you have a date? Any dates?
Tomorrow morning, let's go. No, I don't, but remember the window I talked about, January, warmer January through probably April, the beginning of April is when it's free and clear, no spiders, no snakes, no scorpions, no mummies. And we just go out there and do what we can. And closer to the end of the year, when everything's dying back, it's a much smaller window, November, December. We don't do anything during the holidays. But we have time, we have the future. And unfortunately, our cleaning window is kind of closing right now, especially with temperatures like this today and tulips coming up through the ground. That tells you that there's undergrowth already making its way up. Poison ivy doesn't die.
Well, next time you organize a cleanup, definitely let us know and we can
will.
share the volunteer opportunity on our Facebook and rally some help.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Definitely.
Go out there and be advocates.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. We
Very, very